Okay, so I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin, iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayra al-maghdubi alayhim walad-dallin, sadaqa Allahu al-aliyyul azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر الأحد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Peace be upon you, O Aba Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you from us all is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon Al-Hussein, and upon Ali the son of Hussein, and upon the children of Hussein, and upon the companions of Hussein. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So, we've had 7 nights of foundation. We've recovered a word, Shahada, witness, with the cost borne in the body. And a chain traced from Abel through the prophets to the family of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon them all. The theology of the candle, the khutbah of Mina and the 3 silences, fear, comfort, and the narrowing of the moral vision. The shared ground and divergences with the Christian witness, and the methodology that has carried us forward ever since, honor without conflation. We had the secular neighbor, Marx, Fanon, and then augmented by and taught and corrected by Dr. Ali Shariati, and the question of what becomes of sacrifice when the form is preserved and the content is missing. And last night, with our beloved Abdul Fattah Abbas, peace and blessings be upon him, at the Euphrates, we went to Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, Quang Duc, and Aaron Bushnell, whose worship is your walking for. And tonight is the 3rd panel of the triptych. The secular revolutionary panel was Marx and Fanon. The anti-colonial national panel was Vietnam. And tonight is the aesthetic state-manufactured panel. Tonight is Japan. And this is actually the most difficult of the 3. Because Japan gives us the tradition where the aesthetic of a noble death reached its most refined form in human history, and in our own lifetime's memory, its most dangerous corruption. We will honor what is true in the tradition. We will name what was done to it by the state that came to use it. And we will hold one further question, the question that, in fact, will turn out to be the structural heart of this night. A question that was put on the table 13 centuries ago by our beloved Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, when she stood before a tyrant and answered him in one phrase that has come down to us across the centuries. The verse that hangs over the night is short. It is from Surah Al-Isra, the chapter of the night journey, and it speaks in a number of Arabic words, maybe 17, to every faculty of the soul by which the human being is moved. In Quran, Surah Al-Isra, the chapter of the night journey, 17th chapter of the Quran, verse number 36, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. Indeed, the hearing, the sight, and the heart, of each of these you shall be questioned." Reflect on that verse. It does not name a single object the prohibition is specifically for. It says only, do not pursue what you do not know. The faculty of pursuit is what is being addressed. And then the verse names the 3 faculties through which the pursuit happens: the hearing, the sight, and the heart. We hear and follow because we like the sound of it. We see and follow because we're moved by the look of it. and our hearts agree to because the agreeing feels right. And then the verse closes the door. Each of these you shall be questioned. Every faculty by which a human being is moved is itself answerable. Not just the actions, the responsiveness. Not just what we did, what we let our eye and our ear and our heart be moved by. Tonight we walk into a tradition whose entire genius is to move the eye and the ear and the heart. The Bushido of the samurai is one of the most aesthetically refined ethical systems any culture has actually produced. The cherry blossom in spring is one of the most beautiful images in any people's visual vocabulary. The kamikaze pilot's silhouette against the dawn, and we will speak of what was done to that silhouette in 1944 and 45, was photographed and made into an icon precisely because it was seen as beautiful. The verse is at the door of the night. Beauty does not exempt. The eye that found the cherry blossom moving will be asked on the day, what content was that beauty filled with? This is the test of this night. Please give me a salawat, and we move on to the first of the 3 points. What Sayyedah Zaynab saw, and hold on to that question. Before we walk into the Bushido and the cockpit, I want you to hold a question in your hearts for this entire night. Tonight, we're going to be told something I want you to feel the weight of from the very start. Beauty can be a trap. Truth is the only test. That is the takeaway. The night of Furqan, the night the congregation is taught the discrimination between the true witness and the counterfeit form of witness, which will be inshallah the next session, but hold on to the question for now. Because when Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, the daughter of the commander of the faithful, the granddaughter of the Prophet, was brought in chains with the orphan children of her brother Imam al-Hussein into the court of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa, when the head of her brother was on a platter at the tyrant's feet, when the children of the household were dead behind her, Ibn Ziyad turned to her and he asked her a single question. What did God do to your brother and your family? And the references for all of this are in the write-up. And she said, Zaynab, who had walked beside her brother into that desert, who had buried her nephews in the sand of Karbala, who had carried the children of the slaughtered through the markets of Damascus, or who would carry the children of the slaughtered through the markets of Damascus, she answered him in Kufa with a single phrase, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. And then she continued, because Sayyedah Zaynab does not stop at one phrase, and she said, they were a group for whom God had destined martyrdom. They rushed forward to their resting places. Soon God will gather you and them, and then you will be interrogated harshly. Then you will see who wins. May your mother mourn over you, O son of Marjana. So hold the question. If we're going to spend the next hour or so saying that beauty can be a trap, and we are, and if Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, looked at the slaughter of her family, said that what she saw was nothing but beauty, then what is the difference between the beauty that was a trap and the beauty that Sayyedah Zaynab saw? That is the question that we will, God willing, answer tonight. That is the discrimination we will, God willing, be taught. And the 72 who would not flicker, the men whose vows on the night of Ashura are the subject of tonight's maqtal, were already on that night before the morning of slaughter, seeing what she would later on the road from Kufa to Damascus? Nay. So hold the question. The night is for the answer. Please give me a salawat and we move to the way of the samurai. So we go to Saga Prefecture in southern Japan in the year 1716. A retired samurai is dictating to a younger man named Tashiro Suramoto his reflection on the calling he has spent his life inside. His name is Tsunetomo. After his lord's death, his master's death in 1700, Tsunemoto had wished to commit seppuku, the ritual self-administered death of the loyal retainer following his master's passing. But the Tokugawa shogunate, the regime at the time, had by that time forbidden the practice by an edict. So Tsunemoto retreated. He shaved his head. He took the robe of a Buddhist monk. And for 20 years, he lived in retirement, training a younger generation of samurai whose own swords would, in the long Tokugawa peace, never see a single battle. The book Suramoto compiled is called Hagakure, In the Shadow of Leaves, the book of the samurai. And here is the first thing I want you to feel before we read a single line from it. Hagakure is a peacetime book. Tsunetomo himself never fought a battle. He was, in the strict sense, a samurai with no employer and a sword with no enemy. The book he dictated is an aristocrat class meditation on readiness for death, written by a man whose own death readiness had been administratively forbidden, addressed to a class of warriors whose own swords would never leave their scabbards in earnest. And this matters, because what Tsunemoto wrote in retirement, what he meant as a meditation for retired warriors, would 2 centuries later, or multiple centuries later, be picked up by a militarized Japanese state, severed from its own internal cautions and read as a battlefield manual. The misreading is the very seed of the corruption. And before the misreading, there is the book itself. And the book is serious. So we read it carefully before we say anything about what was later done with it. The opening of chapter 1 of Hagakure is the most universally quoted line in Japanese cultural history. It reads, and the references are all in the write-up, "The way of the samurai is found in death. When it comes to either or, there is only the quick choice of death. It is not particularly difficult. Be determined and advance." Most reception of Hagakure stops over there. The way of the samurai is found in death. Khalas. That is the line that gets carved into film posters. But Tsunetomo does not stop there. He keeps going. And what comes next is what most readers do not know. He continues, again, the references are in the write-up. This is still from chapter 1. He says, "To say that dying without reaching one's aim is to die a dog's death is the frivolous way of sophisticates. When pressured with the choice of life or death, it is not necessary to gain one's aim. To die without gaining one's aim is a dog's death and fanaticism, but there is no shame in this. This is the substance of the way of the samurai." The phrase "a dog's death," inujini in Japanese, is the term for a death without purpose, a death that achieves nothing. Tsunetomo is defending the dog's death. He is saying, yes, dying without gaining anything is what the sophisticates call fanaticism. So what? There is no shame in this. This is the substance of the way. This is the raw Hagakure ethos. Die anyway, even if it achieves nothing. And this is what the state will later seize upon. When the Tokotei is formed in October 1944, when 23 young men in Zero fighters are told to fly into American carriers, the state will not need to invent the doctrine that the dog's death is acceptable. Tsunetomo, centuries earlier, has already provided it. But, and this is the move that I want you to feel, Hagakure does not stop with the defense of the dog's death either. Listen to a different passage from chapter 1. Tsunetomo has been speaking of the samurai's daily mental rehearsal of his own death. And then, without warning, he suddenly says this. Again, the reference is in the write-up. He says, "Compassion is like a mother who nurtures one's fate. Examples of the ruin of merciless warriors who were brave alone are conspicuous in both past and present." Read that sentence again. Reflect on that sentence again. I'm going to say it once more because it's an important sentence. Compassion is like a mother who nurtures one's fate. Examples of the ruin of merciless warriors who were brave alone are conspicuous in both past and present. The merciless warrior who was brave alone, the exact human silhouette that the Kamikaze program of 1944 to 1945 will later manufacture, is the profile that Tsunetomo names as ruin, not at nobility, as ruin. This is Hagakure's own internal warning against precisely what the state will later use Hagakure's name in order to do. And then, at the very end of the book, in a section called Late Night Idle Talk, Tsunetomo lays out his own 4 personal vows. And again, the references are in the write-up. He says, "Never to be outdone in the way of the samurai, to be of good use to the master, to be filial to my parents, to manifest great compassion, and to act for the sake of man." Note carefully the 4th vow. To manifest great compassion and to act for the sake of man. Not honor, not loyalty, not glory, compassion. Acting for the sake of mankind. This is the apex. This is the vow that in Tsunetomo's own structure crowns the other 3. The 4th steps outside the path, the master, the parents, and addresses humanity as a whole itself. And here's the move that I really want you to feel. The Kamikaze program, when it came in 1944, did not violate Hagakure on the surface. It violated Hagakure's own declared apex. The form survived. The cherry blossom, the readiness for death, the morning rehearsal, all of this could be preserved, while the apex was silently removed and discarded. Compassion as the highest declared principle was excised, and the surface, the form, was retained. This is precisely the methodology of every state-manufactured form of witness. The corruption of a tradition is not always the rejection of its surface. Sometimes it is the silent removal of its apex, while the surface and the veneer is preserved. Hold on to this. We will see this move again in the Kamikaze program in what was done to Karbala by certain late medieval embellishers, in what the empire of our own age has done to the vocabulary of democracy and freedom. The form has been preserved, but the apex has been silently removed. And now we come on to the Prince of Mito. 2 centuries after Tsunetomo, in 1900, a Japanese man named Nitobe, who was descended from samurai stock, and by then he was a Christian, published in English a book entitled Bushido, The Soul of Japan. He wrote it specifically for a Western audience, and it preserves the internal tensions of the tradition that the militant 1930s and 1940s Japanese state would very soon paper over. In chapter 2 on rectitude, or Ji, Nitobe writes, "Rectitude is the power of deciding upon a certain course of conduct in accordance with reason, without wavering, to die when it is right to die, to strike when it is right, when to strike is right." The references are in the write-up. To die when it is right to die. The discrimination is built into the definition of the virtue. And in chapter 3 on courage, Nitobe quotes a prince of Mito, the Mito branch of the Tokugawa, the most philosophical branch of the Japanese shogunate. And he writes, and the reference again is in the write-up, "Death for a cause unworthy of dying for was called a dog's death. To rush into the thick of battle and to be slain in it, says the Prince of Mito, is easy enough, and the merest churl is equal to the task. But, he continues, it is true courage to live when it is right to live, and to die only when it is right to die. To rush into battle and be slain, easy. The merest churl can do it. Dying is not the test. True courage is to live when it is right to live, and to die only when it is right to die. And then Tobe adds a cross-reference. He writes, and again, the references are all in the write-up, and yet the prince had not even heard of the name of Plato, who defines courage as the knowledge of things that a man should fear and that he should not fear. Plato, 2.5 millennia a world away, the same definition. Courage is not the willingness to die. Courage is the knowledge of what is worth fearing and what is not. So here is where point 1 leaves us. The way of the samurai in its serious form had its own internal critique. Tsunetomo named compassion as its apex. Tsunetomo named the merciless warrior who was brave alone as ruinous. Nitobe named discrimination as the test. The Prince of Mito named the dog's death as the failure mode. And Plato, of course, agreed. The form had a soul. The form had its own warnings. The form had in its own classical articulation the antibodies against its later corruption. And yet, when the corruption came in the autumn of 1944, in a battlefield in the Philippines, the state needed to silence all of these voices to send the boys into the cockpit. The state did not weaponize Bushido in spite of Bushido's serious form. The state weaponized Bushido by silencing Bushido's serious form. So now we turn to that airfield. Please give me a salawat and we go to Mabalakat on the 25th of October 1944. So on the 20th of October 1944 in Mabalakat airfield on the island of Luzon in the Japanese-occupied Philippines, Vice Admiral Onishi, a man we will return to before the night is over, has flown to Mabalakat to take command of the 1st Air Fleet. Onishi, however, has a problem. The American advance through the Pacific is now within striking distance of the Philippines. Japan's carrier-based air power has been decimated. Conventional air operations are no longer producing any meaningful results. The Japanese homeland is, in the calculation of the imperial headquarters in Tokyo, weeks away from being directly threatened. Onishi convenes a meeting at Mabalakat. He proposes a new tactic. Toko, special attack. The deliberate crashing of an aircraft with a pilot inside into an enemy ship. And he asks for volunteers. 23 young men step forward. The squadron is named Shikishama, after a poem invoking the Yamato spirit and the cherry blossom in spring as the image of the Japanese soul. The first commander is Lieutenant Seki, 23 years old, a graduate of the 70th class of the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy, married only the previous spring to a young woman named Mariko, formerly an instructor at the Naval Air Group. When Seki is informed of his command, the eyewitness accounts say he bowed his head for 10 full seconds before he answered. And when he raised it, he is reported to have said, "Please do appoint me to this post." The Shikishama squadron flies its first sortie on the 21st of October. They locate no targets and they return. 3 more days of failed sorties. Then, on the 25th of October 1944, Lieutenant Seki leads 5 Zero fighters carrying 25-kilogram bombs in the first officially credited organized kamikaze attack of the war. They strike the escort carriers of Taffy 3. The USS St. Lo is hit. None of the 5 returned. The program that began that morning would, by August of the following year, have killed approximately 4,000 young Japanese men in cockpits. And the program had a name, Tokotai. It had the aesthetic vocabulary, the cherry blossom, Yamato Damashi. It had a state behind it, and it had the cherry blossom. Always throughout, the cherry blossom. Now, the cherry blossom is not new to Japan in 1944. It's one of the oldest aesthetic motifs in any culture. The petal that falls at the height of its beauty. The meditation on impermanence, mono no aware. We met the cherry blossom a couple of nights ago on the night we spoke of the young men of the Imam's house who walked out on the morning of Ashura. Qasim ibn al-Hassan, Ali al-Akbar, Aoun and Muhammad, the sons of Sayyedah Zaynab. Peace and blessings be upon them all. The maqtal of that night honored these four young men with the image of 4 cherry blossoms on the grey stone, opening into the dawn that would take them. Tonight we see the same image as state co-opted. The cherry blossom branch on tonight's grey stone has been rendered in its corrupted form, darkened, pierced, the petals fallen. The cloth that wraps it is stained with a black that will not wash out. The aesthetic is older than its corruption. The corruption is that the state took the aesthetic and wrote a script for it. Lieutenant Seki himself, when he served as an instructor at one of the agencies from January to June of 1944, before he himself was sent to the cockpit, used a phrase to his students. He said, and the references are in the write-up, he said, "My students fall like mountain cherry blossoms." The instruction Seki gave to the next class, before he himself was the one who fell, was the instruction the state had given him to give them. The cherry blossom written into the cockpit, the aesthetic marshaled into the script. Now I'd like to read for you Seki's own letters in the days before his founding mission. We honor the boy without endorsing the system that used him. That is the methodology of this night, the methodology we named on the 5th night with Hor and the 21 on the beach. Honor without conflation. This is Seki's letter to his wife's parents in Kamakura. He writes, and the references for all of these are in the write-up. To my mother in Seiyo, please forgive me for causing you hardship since I was very young and for my lack of filial piety. Now standing at the crossroads of victory or defeat for the empire, I am determined to repay the emperor's grace with my own body. There is nothing that surpasses this as the long-cherished desire of a military man. I am determined to repay the emperor's grace by carrying out a tayatari, meaning a body crushing, attack on an aircraft carrier with my own body for the Empire of Japan. Everyone take care, Yukio. His name was Yukio Seki. The references are in the write-up. Note the technical word, body crushing, tayatari. The military engineering term, the action the state was asking him to perform. Spiritualized in the propaganda, engineering language in the cockpit. And here is Seki's letter to his wife of a mere 7 months, the woman he had married only the spring before, Mariko. And he writes, and the reference again are in the write-up. Dear Mariko, I am truly sorry for going to fall without being able to do anything for you. Even without words, I think you, with readiness as the wife of a military man, are sufficiently able. Please keep in mind to show filial piety to your parents. I write now before my departure while many memories come to me. I hope Emi and her young boy also will be in high spirits. Yukio. 3 sentences for the wife of his life. 2 paragraphs about her parents and her sister. The script the state has given him does not have a room for the marriage of 7 months. The boy is delivering the form because the form is what the state requires. The interiority is silently overwritten. This is what the cherry blossom in the state's hands looks like. Let's now look at the letters of 3 boys. Now I want to read you the final letters of 3 other young men, 3 of the 4,000 who would die in the program between October 1944 and August 1945. 3 boys in 3 different registers of what the state was overwriting in them. Honor without conflation, applied with extra care over here. We honor the boys. We name what was done to them. We do not flatten them into either being heroes or victims. And the source for all three letters is the Manoa Journal, volume 13, number 1, and the references are written in the write-up. First of all, you have Captain Adachi Takuya, who was the seduced. The first letter is from Captain Adachi Takuya. He was killed in the Okinawa area on the 28th of April, 1945, at the age of 23. A letter to his parents written after they had visited him at the airfield before his final mission. He writes, and the references are all in the write-up. He writes, "The difficulty of the journey you made to see me was clearly evident in your disheveled hair and in the hollows under your eyes. It made me want to bend my knees and worship before you. In the wrinkles on your brows was vivid testimony of the pains you took to raise me. When you took my hand and passed it over your chilblains, I experienced a sense of profound peacefulness, unlike anything I have experienced since joining up. Like being a baby again and longing for the warmth of a mother's love. It is because I bask in the beauty of your deep devotion that I can martyr myself for you. For in death I will sleep in the world of your love. Even if I should die, it will be with a peaceful spirit. The war zone is where these beautiful emotions are put to the test. If death means a return to this world of love, there is no need for me to fear. At 1600 hours, our meeting was over. Watching you walk out of the gate, I quietly waved goodbye." The references in the write-up. This is the most aesthetically beautiful letter in the entire corpus of human grief within this context that I've seen. And precisely for that reason, it is the most dangerous. You see, this boy was sincere. Every word he wrote, he meant. The form of his letter is consummate, and the script he is delivering is the state's. The state did not need to manipulate his sincerity. The state needed his sincerity to be real. Real sincerity, channeled through a script the state had written, was what put him in the cockpit. He thought he was dying for his mother's love. He was dying for an empire that by April 1945 was already 3 months from collapse. This sermon's job is not to mock him or to insult him. The sermon's job is to grieve for him while naming the system that turned a son's love for his mother into a weapon. Next, we look at Captain Furukawa Takao. The second letter is from Captain Takao, killed in the sea of Kagoshima on the 21st of April 1945, aged a mere 25. A native of the Saga prefecture, the same Saga, the same province where Tsunetomo dictated Hagakure centuries earlier that we went through earlier within this session. He wrote a letter to his pregnant wife. The closing sentence is what the night turns on. He writes, and the references again are all in the write-up. He writes, "Now more than ever, the fleetingness of human life astonishes me, but I have become a much stronger person. You too must become strong. Wait for me. I will return without fail. Until you've safely given birth to our child, I have no intention of dying easily." Until you've safely given birth to our child, I have no intention of dying easily. This is the boy who resisted the script. The voice of the kamikaze program had to drown out. The young man who wanted to live to see his child born, and the system killed him anyway. His son Takashi was born in the months following his death. The family really does exist, and the unborn child did grow up. And then you have Second Lieutenant Tomisawa. And this is, of course, the third letter. This was just before Second Lieutenant Tomisawa's final mission. And the single line that breaks open the script is as follows. Again, the references are all in the write-up. He writes, "At least for me, also, the time of final service has arrived. I very deeply appreciate my special upbringing until now. I am one who lacked courage, but please do speak well of me. Shall I keep silent? Shall I try to be quiet about this? Father, mother, please do congratulate me. I am one who lacked courage, but please do speak well of me. This is one of the most haunting sentences in this entire corpus. The boy is naming in his own voice what the script could not paper over. He knows the courage is not there. He is asking his family to effectively lie for him in death because in life he could not summon what they would describe him as having. Shall I keep silent? Shall I try to be quiet about this? The boy is on the edge of refusing. And then, immediately, and you can almost hear the click of it, the script returns. Father, mother, please do congratulate me. The state-manufactured form papering over a doubt the boy did not quite have permission to voice. 3 boys, 3 voices, 3 different things happening underneath the form. Adachi was sincere in the script. Furukawa was sincere against the script. Tomisawa was sincere despite the script. And the system used all 3 of them in the same way. The state did not need any one of these boys to feel any one particular thing. The state needed them in the cockpits. The form is what was important, is what mattered. The boy was used regardless of what the boy felt. This is what state-manufactured form looks like when you look at it closely. And it is exactly the thing, said Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, the question we've been holding from the start of this evening, would later refuse to call beauty. But before we move on, there's one more letter from the Kamikaze period. Not a pilot's letter, but the architect's. Vice Admiral Onishi, we mentioned him earlier. By the spring of 1945, the Tokotai program he had instituted had taken approximately 4,000 young Japanese lives. The American advance continued. The bombs that would fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and we will speak of those bombs momentarily, were already in their secret being prepared. On the 15th of August 1945, Emperor Hirohito broadcast the surrender of Japan. The war was over. The next day, Onishi entered his official residence in Tokyo. He took up the tanto, the short blade that is traditionally used for seppuku, which is the ritual, the ritual for self-administered death. And he committed the ritual self-administered death, but he did so without what we call a kayashakunin. The kayashakunin is the second swordsman in this ritual whose role is the mercy cut that ends the suffering. This is the mercy that is built into the form. Onishi refused the kayashakunin. He suffered for more than 15 hours. He died in the early morning of the 17th of August. The note he left was addressed first to the spirits of the Special Attack Corps, to the 4,000 boys he had ordered to die. And he wrote, and again, the references are all in the write-up. And he wrote the following: to the spirits of the Special Attack Corps, I offer my deepest gratitude. You fought well. Believing in our ultimate victory, you scattered like blossoms, becoming human bullets. Yet that belief was not fulfilled. By my death, I seek to atone before the spirits of my former subordinates and their bereaved families. The reference, like I said, is in the write-up. And then he turned his note to the youth of Japan. And he wrote, and again, the references for this are in the write-up. He writes, after my death, if you act rashly, know that recklessness aids the enemy. If you heed the imperial will, exercise self-restraint, and endure hardship, then my death will have meaning. Even in endurance, do not lose the pride of being Japanese. In peacetime, continue to uphold the spirit of the special attack. For the welfare of the Japanese people and for the peace of all humanity, strive to do your utmost. Listen to what the architect has just said. If you act rashly, know that recklessness aids the enemy. The man who institutionalized the dog's death as a program of the state in his final act with his abdomen torn open and the mercy killing refused, condemns the rash sacrifice that he himself had ordered. Even in endurance, do not lose the pride of being Japanese. Endurance, gaman in Japanese, the long, patient bearing with that is the opposite of the explosive, beautiful gesture the cherry blossom is meant to symbolize. The architect of the cherry blossom program, in his last words, told the young, the youth, to choose endurance over this type of sacrifice. For the peace of all humanity, strive to do your utmost. Peace. Peace, not victory, not the resurrection of the empire. Peace of all humanity. The architect, in the final clause of his note, pointed to his nation exactly towards what Tsunetomo 3 centuries earlier had named in his 4th vow, to act for the sake of man. Even the architect of the cockpit, in his last act, condemned what he had built. He fell on his own blade. He refused the mercy cut. He suffered for 15 hours and he died saying, peace and endurance, and the 4,000 pilots whose death he had ordered remained dead. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the sister poet 40 years before. And before I continue, I just want to say, I know this is quite unconventional for a Muharram Majlis, but stay with me because it will make sense as we get closer to the end. Please give me another salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So here's what I want you to know before we leave the kamikaze cockpit. Because what the kamikaze program was, and the fact that it was a distortion of the Bushido tradition, not a fulfillment of it, had already been named in Japan, in the Japanese language, by a Japanese woman 40 years before the Tokotai, before this operation existed. And her name was Akiko Yosano. She was born in Sakai, near Osaka, in 1878. She was a poet and a pacifist, and some people say a feminist. By the time the Russo-Japanese War broke out in 1904, she was one of the most widely read poets in Japan, with a regular column in the literary journal titled The Bright Star. In 1904, her younger brother, Chiazaburo, was conscripted into the Imperial Japanese Army and sent to the siege of Lushon, Port Arthur. In September 1904, while her brother was still in the siege lines, Yosano published in the magazine, in the Bright Star, a poem addressed to him called You Must Not Die, or in Yamazaki's translation, Prithi Do Not Die. It was at the time regarded as an extremely unpatriotic poem. In some quarters of the Japanese public, it was called treasonous. Yosano was monitored by the authorities for the rest of her life. And the poem became, after the Second World War, one of the most beloved anti-war poems in the Japanese language. Listen to the heart of the poem, and the reference, of course, is in the write-up. She writes, O younger brother mine, for thee I weep. Prithly do not die, for you were born the very last, and our parents loved you all the more. Yet they made thee grasp a blade in hand, taught thee kill a man thou shall, kill a man and die you too, groomed you thus to age 24. Groomed you thus to age 24. The poem then turns sharply to the question, I prithee do not die, the heavenly prince does not himself lead by his own august presence his troops to battle. For to command that men shed blood of men and die following the beastly path, and tell us death be the glory of men. If his highness's heart be compassionate, how could he truly think it so? The heavenly prince, meaning the emperor, does not himself lead by his august presence his troops into battle. The emperor is sitting in Tokyo, and the boys he has ordered into the trenches are dying for an empire whose ruler does not put his own body on the line. To command that men shed blood of men and die following the beastly path, and tell us death be the glory of men. Listen very carefully to the phrase that Yosano uses, the beastly path. The Japanese term in the original is chikushodo, the way of beasts. In Japanese Buddhism, chikushodo is one of the 6 realms of rebirth, the realm of beasts, the realm into which the soul descends as a punishment for living an animalistic life of unreasoning violence. It is the Buddhist condemnation of mindless killing. Yosano has just used the same theological vocabulary the Bushido tradition used for the dog's death and applied it to state-manufactured death itself. The Japanese internal critique of state martyrology, in the very theological vocabulary of the very tradition the state would later corrupt, was already articulated in 1904, 40 years before the kamikaze program even existed. The sister told the empire it was sending her brother to the way of beasts. The empire did not listen. 40 years later, the empire was sending 4,000 brothers. The cherry blossom of Tsunetomo's apex of compassion, the Prince of Mito's true courage to live when it is right to live, the sister poet's do not die, the architect's own dying repentance, all of these voices were in the Japanese tradition when the state in 1944 sent the boys into the cockpits, yet the state silenced all of them. And now we look at the other empire. Before we turn from the cockpit to the corrective night, which is the next session, before we walk to the question Sayyedah Zaynab put on the table at the very start, let us name what was happening in those very same 9 days, the 9 days of August 1945, from the bomb that fell on Hiroshima to the surrender Japan accepted at the Imperial Conference. Because to name one empire's state-manufactured death without naming the other would be to honor the dead unevenly. In those same 9 days, from Hiroshima to surrender, while Vice Admiral Onishi was watching his empire collapse all around him and preparing himself for the blade with which he would 2 days later refuse the mercy cut, 2 American bombs fell on 2 Japanese cities. The 6th of August 1945, Hiroshima. By the year's end, some 140,000 souls had returned to their Lord. And the 9th of August 1945, Nagasaki. Some 74,000 more, including, in a cruel historical irony, the largest community of Japanese Christians in the world, descendants of the underground church that had survived the Tokugawa persecutions for 2 centuries. The bomb fell less than a kilometer from the cathedral. The American president at the time was Harry S. Truman. On the 11th of August 1945, 5 days after Hiroshima, 2 days after Nagasaki, Truman wrote a private letter to a representative of the Federal Council of Churches who had protested the bombing. Listen to what the President of the United States wrote by his own pen, and the reference is in the write-up. He wrote this: "Nobody is more disturbed over the use of atomic bombs than I am, but I was greatly disturbed over the unwarranted attack by the Japanese on Pearl Harbor and their murder of our prisoners of war. The only language they seem to understand is the one we have been using to bombard them." This is the important bit. When you have to deal with a beast, you have to treat him as a beast. The same word, beast, the way of beasts. Yosano had named the path of beast as what the empire was sending its young men to. Truman named the people on whom his bombs fell as themselves the beast that were to be treated as beasts. And this also has echoes with what the Zionist regime speaks about when it speaks of Gaza, when it speaks of Lebanon, when it speaks of Iran, when it speaks of the entire world. They use the term Amalek, the Japanese use the term beast, and so did Truman. The dehumanization that Yosano had warned was being done to her brother by his own empire was being done to her people by the opposing empire 40 years later. And now I have to tell you something that popular American and Western narratives do not preserve. The American government in the summer of 1945 already knew that Japan was seeking to surrender. The historian I name is Hasegawa, professor at the University of California in Santa Barbara. In his book, Racing the Enemy, Stalin, Truman, and the Surrender of Japan, published by the Harvard University Press, 2005. The findings in summary. Japanese Foreign Minister Togo had, on the 12th of July 1945, 3 weeks before Hiroshima, instructed his ambassador in Moscow to request Soviet mediation for peace. The emperor himself authorized this approach. American cryptanalysts had broken the Japanese diplomatic code. The magic intercepts were briefed to Truman at Potsdam. Truman knew by the 17th of July that Japan was seeking surrender through Soviet channels. The American Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, drafted a proposal that would have clarified the surrender terms to allow Japan to retain the imperial institution. Stimson believed this clarification would have allowed Japan to surrender without the bombs. The proposal was set aside for political reasons, for post-war order with the Soviet Union, for reasons that had nothing to do with saving lives. The Potsdam Declaration contained no mention of imperial preservation. The Soviet Union entered the war against Japan on the 8th of August 1945 between the two bombs. The Soviet offensive collapsed Japan's last major army group within days. The Imperial Conference that finally accepted the Potsdam terms convened after the Soviet entry, not after Hiroshima. Hasegawa's conclusion is as follows. The Soviet entry into the war was at least as decisive as the atomic bombs in breaking the Japanese leaders' deadlock. The bombs were one factor among several in a process where the alternative path, clarifying surrender terms while accepting Soviet entry, was rejected by the US and the Allies on political grounds, which is to say, there is no clean side in the August of 1945. There is the cockpit on one side with its young men and its overwritten interiority, and there is the bomb bay door on the other side with its decision makers and its rejected alternatives and its language of beasts. Both forms are state manufactured. Both ended bodies the empires considered expendable. The architect of the cockpit, Onishi, repented in his last act. He fell on his own blade. He refused the mercy cut. He left a note saying peace. The architect of the bomb, Henry Truman, lived another 27 years until 1972. He never, in any public statement or any declassified private correspondence, expressed regret for the bombs. He went to his grave and to hell defending them. Tonight we honor the death of both. The 4,000 kamikaze pilots, the 214,000 of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we name the systems that killed them without conflation and without the selective honesty that would let one empire off the hook to convict another. The cockpit and the bomb bay door. The cherry blossom and the mushroom cloud. Both are the same form. The form alone beauty that the empire manufactures. The form that Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, was not deceived by, even when the empire of her own age tried it. And before this Muharram is over, we will hear of yet another empire whose state-manufactured death has been the greatest atrocity of our time. And we will name what stands against it. Tomorrow night, the catalogue. The night after, the climax. The Arba'in sessions. The unfolding. Tonight is the seed for all of those. And so now we return to the question that we have been holding all night. The question that Sayyedah Zaynab put upon the table. Please give me a very loud salawat and we move on to what Sayyedah Zaynab saw.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم.
So let us return to the court of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa. And the narrator of this scene is someone called Bashir ibn al-Khuzaym al-Asadi, a Kufan poet who was present that day. Bashir tells us that Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, entered the audience chamber unrecognized. She sat among the captive women. Ibn Ziyad asked who she was. He was told, Zaynab, the daughter of Ali. Ibn Ziyad turned to her and he said, praise to God who disgraced you and failed you in your efforts. Sayyedah Zaynab, chained with the children of her brother beside her, with the head of Imam Hussein at the tyrant's feet, did not flinch. She replied, and I quote, and again, the reference for all of these are in the write-up. She said, verily it is the libertine who becomes disgraced and the debauchee who gets refuted, and they are other than us. Then Ibn Ziyad asked his real question. What did God do to your brother and your family? He thought that she would weep. He thought that she would bow. He thought that she would say what every other captive in his court had said. Sayyedah Zaynab, however, did not weep. Neither did she bow. She answered him with the phrase we have been holding all night. And again, the reference for this is in the write-up. She said, I saw nothing but beauty. They were a group for whom God had destined martyrdom, and they rushed forward to their resting places. Soon God will gather you and them, and then you will be interrogated harshly. Then you will see who wins. May your mother mourn over you, O son of Marjana. The narrator says Ibn Ziyad became furious, as if he decided to kill her on the spot. One of his attendants intervened and whispered that a lady cannot be punished for her words. He restrained himself. He did not kill her. But the answer she had given him was the answer that traveled. It is the answer we are still receiving 14 centuries later in this call, on this night. I saw nothing but beauty. So what was this beauty that she saw? Because if everything we have spoken of in the last hour is true, if beauty can be a trap, if the cherry blossom in the state's hand was a counterfeit, if the 4,000 cockpits and the 2 cities and the 15 hours of Onishi's seppuku, and the silent sister poet's verses and the architect's unrepentant bombs are all form alone beauty, what kind of beauty was it that Sayyedah Zaynab saw at Karbala? There are 2 types of beauty. The first is the beauty that the state manufactures, form alone beauty. The cherry blossom whose petal fall is choreographed into a script. The kamikaze pilot's silhouetted photograph used against the dawn. The mushroom cloud that Robert Oppenheimer watching the Trinity test in 1945 even was compelled to quote from the Bhagavad Gita to describe, now I am become death, the destroyer of words. Even the architect of the bomb reaches for the aesthetic. The Bushido aesthetic, when severed from its content. The Takfiri suicide attack's sincerity vocabulary. The Tabyeen blade's grief performance. The social media aesthetic of mourning that we will hear of tomorrow night. This kind of beauty has no fixed content. This is the trap. The second is the beauty that Sayyedah Zaynab saw. And listen carefully now, because the discrimination we're about to make is the discrimination the night has been working toward. Sayyedah Zaynab did not deny the surface. She did not pretend the field of Karbala was anything other than an atrocity. The bodies of her family lay broken upon the sand. Her infant nephew, Abdullah ibn al-Hussein, Ali al-Asghar as we say, peace and blessings be upon him, had been killed in his father's arms by an arrow through his throat. The tent of the household had been burnt around them. Sayyedah Zaynab saw all of this. She would later, in the court of Yazid in Damascus, name every single act of it in detail. And she would make Yazid, may God curse him, may God's mercy be far from him, weep at that recitation. She did not flinch from the surface. And this is the discrimination we are now learning. She saw beneath the surface to the truth. The truth that her family had stepped forward with their eyes wide open to fulfill what God had written. God had written the killing of them. They came forth to their resting places. The truth that the witness was complete. The divine decree of God was being fulfilled. She held upon both. She did not collapse one into the other. The surface was atrocity, and the content was the most beautiful thing the human earth has ever seen. She held both, and that is what the trained eye sees. The surface is what it is. The truth beneath the surface is the beauty. And here is the heart of the night. Here is what the truth was that she saw, what it consisted of. Listen very carefully now. The beauty that Sayyedah Zaynab saw was the beauty of the 72's loyalty. Not the loyalty of the soldier to his commander. Not the loyalty of the subject to his emperor. Not the loyalty of the kamikaze pilot to the Tokotai or the imperial will. Not the loyalty of the citizen to a flag. Not even, and listen very carefully here, not even the loyalty of the companion to a man as such. The loyalty of every one of the 72, Muslim bin Awsaja, Habib ibn Madahir, Sa'id ibn Abdullah, Zuhair ibn Qayn, Burair Hamadani, peace and blessings be upon them all, and others, the loyalty of every one of them was to God himself, to the truth God had revealed, and to Imam al-Hussein, as the Imam of their time, as the proof of God upon his hearth. That is what beauty is. That is what no empire can manufacture. That is what the kamikaze program, for all of its aesthetic perfections, could not and would not be able to produce. This is what the 72 had already, fully and completely, on the night their vows were tested. And tonight, in the breath that follows, we will hear in the maqtal, with each of those 5 companions named, we will hear what was said when the master of the witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him, gathered them all together and offered them their freedom. And that is what Sayyedah Zaynab would later, in the courts of the tyrants, name the 72, first of all, the kamikaze were emperor loyal soldiers. But the 72 were God loyal witnesses. And that is the difference. The form may look similar superficially and from the outside, but the content is an infinite distance apart. The kamikaze pilot's loyalty was to a man, Hirohito, who was about to surrender, to a polity that would within months be entirely dissolved, to an aesthetic, the cherry blossom that the state had written into the script. The 72's loyalty was to God himself, to the truth that he had revealed, and to the Imam that he had appointed. That loyalty does not dissolve when the empire falls. That loyalty is the form God himself has filled with his own content. That is the beauty the eye trained by faith perceives. That is what Sayyedah Zaynab saw. The night teaches us to see as she saw. So we now ask the question Sayyedah Zaynab's discrimination has commanded. By what test do we know which beauty we are seeing? That is the test we now turn to. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the last point, which is form alone is not the test.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So we've already seen with Sayyedah Zaynab's eye what the discrimination is. And we name it here briefly. Form alone, beauty, is not the test. The cherry blossom in spring is beautiful, but written into a Tokotai script, it is the trap. The kamikaze pilot's silhouette against the dawn is beautiful, but the photograph the state took of it is a trap. Even the mushroom cloud that Oppenheimer reached for the Bhagavad Gita to describe, even the architect of the empire's atrocity reaches for the aesthetic when he tries to name what he has done. That is form alone beauty. That is the trap. The master of witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him, did not die form alone beautifully. 3 days without water, his children dying around him. The surface of his death was absolutely atrocity. And yet, through the eye of Sayyedah Zaynab, through the eye Sayyedah Zaynab trained, the content of his death was the most beautiful thing the human earth has ever seen. Form alone is not the test. Secondly, the second test that we set aside is sincerity is not the test either. Adachi, who we mentioned earlier, was sincere, and the state used his sincerity. Furukawa was sincere when he refused. The state used his sincerity by killing him anyway. Tomisawa was sincere when he summoned what he could not find. The state used his sincerity by writing the script he then performed. All three sincerities were used the same way by the system that wrote their script. And every empire has its sincere men. Yazid's army at Karbala had its sincere men. Their sincerity did not save them from being on the wrong side of the witness. Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, peace and blessings be upon him, the captain we honored on the fifth night, was sincerely loyal to his commander until the morning he was sincerely loyal to something higher. That morning is what saved him. The sincerity itself did not change. What it was loyal to changed. And that change was everything. The young Israeli soldier today, ordered into the streets of Gaza, told he is defending civilization against barbarism. He is sincere. The American Marine, the young American Marine sent to Iraq in 2003, told that he is defending freedom against tyranny. He was sincere. The kamikaze pilot in 1945, he was sincere. And every one of them was used by a system that did not need their sincerity for anything except to keep them in position. Sincerity is not the test. Sincerity alone cannot tell you whether your death is a witness or a sacrifice for the wrong, or a sacrifice the wrong God demanded. So what is the test? You've listened to me talking and you're thinking, okay, this man is telling me this is not the test, this is not, where is the test? The test is what the master of witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him, Imam al-Hussein, gave the 72 on the night of Ashura 14 centuries ago. He gathered all of them. He praised God. He turned to them, knowing exactly what each one of them would face if they stayed. And he offered them their freedom. Take my family, take the cover of darkness, hold the hand of one of my own and walk out under the stars. The enemy wants only me. And one by one, beginning with Abul Fadl al-Abbas, peace and blessings be upon him, then the sons of Aqil, whom he specifically permitted, and they refused, and then the 72 who were not family, Muslim bin Awsaja, Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, Zuhair ibn Qayn al-Bajali, Habib ibn Madahir, Burayr ibn Khudayr al-Hamadani, peace and blessings be upon them all, and all of the rest. Every one of them refused. Each of them in their own register. Each of them with their eyes wide open. Each having been given a way out. This is what the test is. Not beauty, not sincerity. The willingness to choose freely with the eyes open, the cause God himself has chosen and appointed. And the cause that God has appointed is named through three criteria. First, service to the worship of the one God. Not to the Emperor of Japan, not to the President of the United States, not to the Prime Minister of any state, however biblically it may profess its claim, not to any flag, not to any state, not to any civilization, not to any aesthetic. La ilaha illallah. There is no God except God. Any death that is claimed as martyrdom, whose content is loyalty to anything below God, is counterfeit by definition. Second, the demand for justice in accordance with revealed law. Not just any cause. The death must be in service of the deen, of the system. The law God revealed to his prophet. Peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions. And the amr bil ma'roof and nahi az munkar, the enjoining the good and the forbidding the evil that it commands. Imam Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, did not die for his land or his family's honor. He died for the deen of his grandfather. He said as much. If you look at his letter to Muhammad bin Hanafiya, he says, I have not risen out of arrogance or a need for power. I'm paraphrasing. I have risen in order to reform the ummah of my grandfather. I desire to do amr bil ma'roof, to enjoin the good and to forbid the evil. The cause is named, and the cause is the cause that God revealed. Third, loyalty to the Imam appointed by God. The proof of God on earth. Who is the criterion? In our age, the hidden Imam. May our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. And in the chain of those who have prepared for his return, from Imam Sayyid Ruhullah al-Musawi al-Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, through Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, through to Imam Sayyid Mushtaba Khamenei, may God protect and strengthen him, the present Wali al-Faqih, until the Imam of our age. May our souls be his ransom, and may God hasten his return. Takes the line back into his own hands. To die for any other authority, irrespective of how beautiful it might be, even a sincerely loved one, is the dog's death. The Hagakure name for it, the Yosano name for it, Inujini, the way of beasts. The cherry blossom that has been written into a state script is, by every test the night that this night has set, the dog's death. It is beautiful in form, but it's entirely empty of content. And the lamps that would not flicker on the night before Ashura, by the same test, are the witnesses. Not because their deaths were any less brutal, because the content their forms were filled with was the worship of the one God, the demand for justice in his revealed law, and loyalty to the Imam that he had appointed. Even Tsunetomo in 1716 named great compassion and acting for the sake of mankind as the apex of the way of the samurai. Even the militant tradition knew it. The form is the form. The test is the content. Beauty without God is empty. Beauty without God is empty. Sincerity without God is exploited. And the witness without the Imam of the age is misdirected. That is the test. That is what Sayyedah Zaynab saw. That is what the 72 embodied. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the pact that we make tonight.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So, what do we carry home this evening? 3 things. First, beauty is not the test and sincerity is not the test, and the Imam of the age is the test. When you watch the news this week and you see a young Israeli soldier declaring that he is defending his civilization, ask the test of his cause. When you see a young American Marine declaring he is fighting for freedom, ask the test of his cause. Every cause but the one whose content is the worship of the one God, the demand for justice in his revealed law, and the loyalty to the Imam that he has appointed, every cause but that one is, by tonight's test, the dog's death. Second, Sayyedah Zaynab's eye is the eye that we are training, not the surface. She did not deny the surface, not the form alone. She was not deceived by the form. We are training to see beneath the surface to the truth. The truth that loyalty to God is the only loyalty that does not betray. The truth that the 72 on this very night, 1400 years ago, were already what we are still trying to learn, they already were. And the third point, honor without conflation. The methodology applied in two registers. To the Bushido tradition, we honored Tsunetomo's seriousness before showing what was done to it. And to the kamikaze pilots, we honored their interiority without endorsing the system that used them. And tonight we applied the same methodology to the empire that opposed the kamikaze empire. We have honored the dead of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, while naming the empire that decided to drop the bomb after knowing that Japan was seeking surrender. The methodology is what saves us from the easy partisanships that flatten the dead. Every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala. That sentence is the answer. We do not have to invent it. We only have to live by the test. This is the pact that we make tonight. And the road ahead. Tomorrow night, we walk into the corrective, into the catalogue. The political counterfeit, the so-called martyrdom claim by Takfiri groups, the suicide attacks on innocent that Daesh or ISIS dressed in religious vocabulary. The ritual counterfeit, the public self-harm performed in the name of mourning, that the senior scholars of our generation have without exception forbidden. And we will speak of this clearly, but with love. And then the cultural counterfeit, martyrdom as an identity badge, photographs of martyrs as aesthetic, the social media mourning tourism, the theology reduced to a mood, and the imperial counterfeit, the empire that calls itself the righteous nation while bombing the children of others, the empire that invokes Amalek over the children of Gaza, the empire whose form Imam Hussein refused at Karbala when he refused Yazid's claim to inherited legitimacy. Tomorrow we apply, across the catalogue, the test we have learnt tonight. And the night after, at noon on the 10th, the witness himself, peace and blessings be upon him, in the climax of the 9 nights that have been preparing. We're not done yet. And the question this series asks you every night is the same question. Where is your brother? Tonight we ask it of the field of Karbala on the 8th of Muharram, where the 72 have already chosen. We ask it of the airfield in Mabalakat in October 1944, where 23 young men were asked the question and answered yes to the wrong cause. We ask it of the Bombay door over Hiroshima, where the question was answered by a president whose private letter described the people below as beasts. We ask it of every young man in uniform, in every uniform in the world tonight, whose state is asking him the question and writing the script for his answer. Where is your brother? And whose worship is he walking for? Please give me a salawat and we move forward just to a prelude to the maqta.
اللهم صل على محمد.
So I bring you at this hour to a night that in the chronicle is 2 nights from this one. The night I bring you to is the night of Ashura, what we call Tasu'a or the Laylat Ashura. The night that precedes the morning of the slaughter. The night when, in the chronicles such as Lahuf and Ayatollah Shahri preserves them for us, Imam Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, gathered his companions, praised God and offered them their freedom. But that night is not tonight. Tonight is the 8th of Muharram. We are 2 days from the morning of the slaughter. The water has been cut from the camp for a day. The voices of the children are beginning to thicken in their throats. Imam Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, has not yet gathered his companions for the test. The lamps in his camp are still lit. The night of the test is 2 nights from this one, Laylat Ashura. The night the lamps will be extinguished and the men will be told they are free to leave. The night of permission, the night the 72 will choose. And tonight, in the breath that follows, we will be taken to that night. In the voice of the hidden Imam, or in a voice that we imagine as his voice. May our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return. We'll be taken 14 centuries across to the men who, when they were given the freedom to leave, said in multiple different registers, we will speak of 5, what we have heard echoed across the centuries. You will hear of a man who said, even unarmed I will stone them. His name was Muslim bin Awsaja, peace and blessings be upon him. You will hear of an old companion of 3 Imams, the elder of the Kufan delegation, a member of the elite force of Imam Ali himself, who on the eve of his death laughed. And when reproached by his fellow elder, the doyen of Quran reciters said, what can be a better time for happiness than this? His name was Habib ibn Madahir al-Asadi, peace and blessings be upon him. You will hear of a man who said, if I were burnt alive and my ashes scattered 70 times, I would not leave you. His name was Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, peace and blessings be upon him. And on the morning of Ashura, when Imam Hussein stood for the noon prayer, this man, Sa'id ibn Abdullah, would step in front of him to take the arrows that were meant for the Imam. The body of his vow on the night will become the body shielding the prayer on the day. You will hear of a man whose loyalty was not inherited but chosen. He had once been what we call Uthmani. On the road to Karbala, he met the Imam. He was changed. He came over. And in the night of Ashura test, he would say, how I would love to be killed 1,000 times and brought back to life. His name was Zuhair ibn Qayn al-Bajali. Peace and blessings be upon him. You'll hear of a Quran reciter, the doyen of reciters, who himself on the morning of Ashura smiled. And when reproached, he said, the distance between us and the heavenly fairies is not more than an hour of fighting against this community and their swords. And his name was Burayr ibn Khudayr al-Hamadani. Peace and blessings be upon him. And you will hear briefly of those whose names the chronicles preserved less. Those whose names the ziyarah of the hidden Imam preserved when no chronicle did. Whose names only God remembers. Yet all of them stood, all of them stayed. All of them are part of the body of light. They are the lamps that would not flicker. And before we begin, I want you to remember one important thing. Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, would later say, when she was asked in the court of the tyrant, I saw nothing but beauty. And what she saw, what she meant when she said beauty, was this: the loyalty of these men. Not the loyalty of soldiers to a commander, not the loyalty of subjects to an emperor, not the loyalty of pilots to a state script, the loyalty of every one of them and all of the 72 to God himself, to the truth that God has revealed, and to the Imam of their time, Imam al-Hussein, peace and blessings be upon him, as the proof of that truth upon the earth. That is what beauty actually is. That is what the empires of this world cannot manufacture, regardless of how hard they try. That is what the cherry blossom, when the state took it, could not capture. And what the 72, on the very night we sit and remember them, already had. I'm going to step aside now and let you hear it for yourselves. Please give me a loud salawat and we segue across to the maqtal.
اللهم صل على محمد وأجل.
And now we have a short supplication before we conclude this session. Peace upon Abel, the first witness of the earth. Peace upon every witness in every tradition who refused to bow to other than God. Peace upon every man and every woman who has ever been wronged, expelled from their home only because they said, our Lord is God. Oh God, we have nowhere to go but your door. You are the one who placed the eye and the ear and the heart in the soul of every child of Adam. And you are the one who told us in your verse from Surah Al-Isra that each of these will be questioned. You will ask the eye for what it found beautiful. You will ask the ear for what it found stirring. You will ask the heart for what it agreed to. O God, train our eye, train our ear, train our heart, that what we agree to be moved by is your truth, and not the form alone beauty the empires of this world manufacture. O God, send your peace and your blessings on your last messenger, Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, and on his family and his righteous companions. Send your peace on the prophets of every house, on Adam, on Abel, on Noah, on Abraham, on Ismail and Ishaq, on Moses and Aaron, on David and Solomon, on John the Baptist and Zechariah, on Jesus the son of Mary, on every one of them whose names we know, and those whose names only you know. O God, tonight we have walked into the most beautiful death philosophy in human cultural history, and we have seen what was done to it by the state that came to use it. O God, grant us the discernment to recognize the form alone beauty wherever it appears, in the empires of yesterday, in the empires of today, and in the empires of tomorrow. Grant us the discernment our beloved Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, taught us by the witness of her one phrase in the court of the tyrant, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I saw nothing but beauty. Train our eye to see what she saw. O God, send your peace on Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, the man who from his pulpit in the Biqa told us that the condition of being one of your friends is to heal the wounds of the tormented and to defend the oppressed, who told us that the first lesson of Imam al-Hussein is the lesson of the poor, who told us in the line we have been earning across these nights that he did not want Karbala to remain in history. Send your peace on his wife, Sayyedah Siham, and on his 5-year-old son, Sayyid Hussein, who fell with him in the same convoy. O God, send your peace on Sheikh Raghib Harb, who taught the south of Lebanon what it means to refuse the handshake of the occupier 8 days to the year before his student joined him. O God, send your peace on Haj Qasim Soleimani, the standard bearer of our own century. The night that takes the full measure of his witness is one night from this one, tomorrow night, the night of the corrective, where his actual martyrdom on the 3rd of January 2020 will be the foil figure against which every counterfeit claim to martyrdom will be weighed. Tonight we hold him in passing and we name him because he is the man who walked the 4 classical stages, Talab, Ishq, Ma'rifat, Shahada, in his walking and in his walking taught us to walk. O God, in this Muharram, the first since the martyrdom of our beloved Imam, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, on the 28th of February 2026, the 8th of Ramadan, 1447, O Allah, O God, please send your peace upon him. The man who 11 days before his martyrdom, before his witness, before his Shahada, stood before the nation and the world and held the line of neither east nor west. We hold him tonight only in passing. We know that the night that takes him as his subject is not yet, but it's coming. Welcome him into your nearness, O God, with your prophets and your imams, your martyrs, your saints and the truthful. O God, send your peace upon Sayyid Hassan, who passed away, who was killed by the most brutal of brutal people 2 years ago. And this is our second Muharram without him. O God, send your peace upon every young man of the resistance who took his father's place and his grandfather's burden in his hands. Peace be upon every young Palestinian who died in the rubble of his father's house in Gaza, holding what he could of his family in a cloth. Peace be upon every young Lebanese who fell in the south. Peace be upon every Iraqi of the Hashd al-Sha'bi who walked into the open against Daesh or ISIS. Peace be upon every young Yemeni and every young Syrian who carried water for the children of someone else's tent. Peace be upon every medic in Gaza who did not stop. Peace be upon every fighter on every resistance front of our generation who returned to his mother with his sleeve folded under and would not let her weep at the sleeve. Peace be upon the children of Minab, the 168 of them, boys, girls, teachers and parents, who fell on the same morning their leader fell, by a tomahawk from a country that signed the laws of war and completely broke them. O God, the longer return is to Hussein ibn Ali, the master of witnesses, in whom every chain finds its completion, to his brother Hassan, peace and blessings be upon him, to their father Ali ibn Abi Talib, the commander of the faithful, the man who could not sleep in Kufa with a full stomach because there was a man in the Hijaz who had not eaten that day. To their mother, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon her. To the Imams of guidance in the chain that runs from Imam al-Hussein to the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom, and may you, O our beloved Lord, hasten his return. O God, send your peace upon Sayyedah Zaynab, peace and blessings be upon her, the eye that saw nothing but beauty at the court of the tyrant, the daughter of Imam Ali, who taught us by one phrase that the discrimination tonight has tried to learn. Send your peace upon Imam Zayn al-Abidin, peace and blessings be upon him, who also at the court, when threatened by Ibn Ziyad with death, replied, "Do you frighten us with death? Do you not know that martyrdom is our habit and our greatness?" O God, send your peace upon the 72 companions whom we heard named in the breath that preceded. Muslim bin Awsaja, the resolute, Habib ibn Madahir al-Asadi, the elder, Sa'id ibn Abdullah al-Hanafi, the lover, Zuhair ibn Qayn al-Bajali, the convert, Burayr ibn Khudayr al-Hamadani, the reciter of the Quran. Peace and blessings be upon them all. And peace upon every companion whose name only you remember, and we know you remember each one. O God, we pray to you for our beloved Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, the new Wali al-Faqih, the son who has taken his father's place at the head of the worship. Preserve him for us, God. Strengthen him, protect him, guide him. Make him the leader that he is trained to be, and the leader you have appointed him to be, until the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom, and the line that he carries is handed back to its rightful holder. O God, hasten the return of the Imam of our age. Make us of his helpers. Make us of his soldiers. Make us of those who, when he calls, are already standing and ready. O God, we have nowhere to go but to you, and no one to ask except you, and no words except the ones you have placed on the tongues of your friends. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to God, and to him is our return. And we repeat your promise, an eternal promise for justice and a warning for all the wrongdoers. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And the wrongdoers will soon know at what goal they will end up. And we add from the depths of everything we have learned tonight, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and he is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.